It's time for Chai and Chat. Chai and Chat.
So, hi Sundari, how are you this week?
Oh, hi, Ranjit. I'm fine. I'm very well, thank you. Yeah.
So
Nice
this
to
is
see you again.
good to see you again, as this is our second episode. And this week, we decided that what we'd talk about, because we're going to introduce bits about ourselves through our podcast, is talking about childhood. And so we've only got 20 minutes, and it's a long way back to remember our childhood. So I'm not going to give anything away because we are only in our 30s.
Well said, Ranjit.
Well, people can't see us because we're on a podcast, so that's okay. So let's talk about our childhoods are very different. I think one of the things that we talked about was how there are similarities in everyone's childhood, but there are also differences as well. I was born and brought up in the Black Country in the West Midlands, and my parents came to this area in the 1960s. I'm going to talk about a time in the 1970s and about my experiences then, which when I look back were quite magical. And you know how you do when you look back, you fill things in and they're slightly different. That's what I'll be talking about. What about yourself?
Right. I'm happy to talk about my childhood as well. I was brought up in Malaysia. I grew up in a small town called Rawang, and there's a lot of history with Rawang. It was involved in the Malaysian emergency period. It was hotspot for guerrilla and insurgency activity, but I grew up in the years after that.
Right.
So it was a thriving mining community, but my childhood was quite idyllic there. But I thought a little bit of my memories and my experiences, because as you said before, I'm a poet. I've sort of expressed myself a little bit in poetry about my childhood. So if you don't mind,
Yes.
I could share a poem with you.
I think that would be really good because actually it will help us think about, well, inspire us to think about shared stories, but also anyone listening to this. I think it's really interesting that aspects of their childhood and memories and, just taking that time out. So great, go ahead.
Okay, it's called Children of the Drain. Nenek say we cannot play in the longkang. Okay, what? We play in the monsoon drain. Escaping Nenek, avoiding her rheumy eyes. Don't play in the hot sun. Why are you wearing that torn singlet? You're wearing market slippers, ah? Neighbors will think we are poor people. No inclination for smarty dressing. Street urchin was the default. Dry season, deep storm drains. Health and safety not a concern. We were the children of the drain. Inquisitive explorers digging in dirt, out from dawn till dusk. Unsupervised gang, spying on passers-by with imagined past lives and future secrets. The comings and goings. You see that fellow? Secret agent, ah? Always carrying an umbrella. Must be poison tip. Lunch was no summer picnic. No cake with lashings of cream washed down with lemonade. We famous five made do with breakfast scraps and condensed milk sandwiches hidden in yellowing Tupperware. The deep tunneling waterways, ideal meeting point. Our roads to exploration, journeys to the overgrown rubber estate. Balancing on fallen trees, traverse muddy streams. Time stood still. We belonged to the drain. When the long days were over, whispers of adventures, shared childhood secrets tucked under pillows. My now me came across my then me in a long-forgotten drain diary. In Nenek's old trunk. She knew Nenek kept secrets too. Nenek is grandmother in Malay, and Nenek was my grandmother. We called her Amma. So that's the beginning. So tell me a little about
Lovely. I think just listening to that, I think there's things in there that I suspected are very shared experiences, like that thing about, playing dawn until dusk, playing out, playing in the dirt. Life was a lot, when you're younger, for a lot of people, it was about being out. These days, a lot of children are in front of screens all the time, but they still get time to play out. And I think that's the thing for me. Remembering my childhood was about being out. I don't ever remember being inside, actually. There's not many memories of being inside. A lot of memories being outside with friends. In fact, we lived in a 2 up, 2 down terraced house in Willenhall, and neighbours were my cousins. So It was my dad's brother. My cousin was similar age to me, and we would always hang out. So we'd go out in the garden, and terrace gardens are very long. And at the end of our garden, there was a railway track. So if you stood at the end of the garden, you looked down, you could see the railway track. And you mentioned something else in the poem, Famous Five, and reading the Famous Five stories afterwards, we always were on adventures as well. There's always something happening. And I think reminiscing and looking back, I've sectioned out those memories as little stories, that things that have happened. And when I see my cousins, we talk about those times and occasions where this happened or that happened. And it was very fond memories as well. So we didn't have much. So we working class background, but things like the yellowing Tupperware you mentioned, I still remember we had like very limited Tupperware. I think this is why I'm addicted to Tupperware now. I buy a lot of Tupperware. I think this is why, because we had like 3 pieces. And in Asian families as well, often it was like, the Tupperware be yellowing because of the curry that was put into it. Yeah, so now I buy a lot of Tupperware. So I have a cupboard fulls of it, and I give it away to people every time I see them, like, take it. Yeah, so lots of things in there that remind me of being young. But tell me more, why was it called, is it the drains?
Children of the Drain.
Children of the
Because we
Drain,
had these very large monsoon drains
right.
that, when obviously monsoon season or very heavy rain carried a lot of the water away, but when they were dry, they used to go into rubber plantations.
Right.
So we used to explore in there, really. Ranjit, when I was thinking about this, I thought you and I would have very different childhood experiences, but it turns out they're quite similar, really.
Yeah.
Perhaps, you grew up, as you say, in Willenhall, is that correct?
Yes,
Is that? Because I grew up, as I said, in this mining town called Rawang in Malaysia, and my upbringing was slightly different in the sense of the area that we grew up in. So Father Daddy, I call him Father, but I still call him Daddy, was the school teacher and the headmaster of the local primary school.
Right.
And we all lived in the compound of the school. They had teachers' quarters and headmasters' quarters. So we lived with them. And I didn't realize that. I was just looking back. The whole area was fenced off because, as I said, we lived in the post-emergency period. So there was still a strong presence of the military and police around our areas. Except growing up as children was very exciting because we used to see the military trucks pull by. I think they were Australian soldiers, as children waving to them, thinking it was a great lot of fun. But we lived in this compounded area and so many little stories about living there because it was on the edge of the jungle and lots of little houses, little explorations. So a lot to do that. It was a very, I would say, idyllic upbringing in many ways. We lived with my dad and my maternal grandparents. I know it sounds very strange because mummy was away working, so it was my maternal grandparents who looked after us. It was great fun because that sort of South Asian way of living, really. And then aunts and uncles used to come round, and at various times different aunts and uncles used to look after us. Playing games. We lived in little bungalows. So, when they were chasing us, trying to get us to come and eat, we were little children, strong, could jump out of windows, ran everywhere barefoot. I remember grandfather asking me to go to the little clubhouse to buy cigarettes, at the age of 7. And I did. Climbed through barbed wire to buy grandfather cigarettes. It was just something you did.
Yeah, it's strange how you talk about sort of people looking after you and taking care of you, because I think for me, we had our cousins living next door, and there was a couple of other Asian families, but we lived in a very white area at the time. So it was strange, though. There was still that sense of community with those few families that we had, nearby. So, looking back, the town was a very small town. It's grown a lot now. I think, it had all those elements of the school was a short walk away. There was like a local church. I used to go to the church as well, even though we're not Christian background. So, but my dad was like, at the end of the day, you're in this country, you might as well, experience everything and be open to it as well, which is, I'm so glad, because, weren't closed to everything. It was like, experience everything.
That's so interesting, you telling me the story about going to school. Well, obviously, I went to school and Daddy was the headmaster. So,
Yes,
when he was during
you won't be able to get away with anything.
Good morning, very silently, Daddy.
Yeah.
And occasionally I would be able to sneak into the headmaster's office And he used to have biscuits in a tin that were, and I used to help myself. So, I was a little bit privileged having Daddy as the headmaster. So all the teachers obviously would have known him as well, because a lot of the teachers lived in the teachers' quarters. So it was a very familiar, very secure. I did feel very loved.
One thing I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned like the military around, and it's almost like you sort of didn't engage with it and were feared by it. It wasn't a fearful
for us
thing.
that was normal. That's how I remember a childhood, especially coming when we used to go into a place called Klang or KL and coming back late at night. I do remember those trips because grandmother would be in the back and my brothers and I would be 8 or 9 at night. We were children, we were fast asleep, and the cars would be stopped and there'd be torchlights in our faces. Daddy would have to open the boot. But that was normal to us, guns being pointed at the cars and things. Just through that, thinking that was normal. And coming to this country as an adult, that was, then I realized that wasn't normal. But I didn't feel threatened. That was just...
there's that thing that makes you a stronger person, because I was just reflecting on that. When I was younger, we didn't have that, and actually the fear our parents would instill in us that if you did something wrong, the policeman is going to come and get you. So much so that I used to be very fearful of authority, and and I think that was a good thing, because brought up to be law-abiding. And I'll share with you, actually, and whoever's listening, that I became a magistrate later on in life. And when I became a magistrate, I remember, again, still fearing authority, must do things right. I realised, actually, a lot of these people that go through the court system do not fear authority. So
oh gosh, yeah, that's definitely been formed by childhood. Yeah. The only person we were afraid of, or is mummy, because she was pretty strict. So mummy's coming home. Better be on one's best behaviour, done all your homework, and also that. I'm sidetracking a little bit. The idea of dressing up, dressing. I only ever wore shorts and my brother's hand-me-downs. I remember distinctly, mummy she'd come to England and bought me this beautiful, I still remember it was a lovely yellow dress, but I didn't think it was lovely at the time. I didn't want to wear it. And I think mummy was offended, I think, because I just wore my brother's hand-me-downs and that's how we were, all cousins. Because I had 3 brothers, a lot of male cousins who were also little. So I was like one of the lads. I'll tell you this funny story, because when we used to all have our hair cut, grandfather used to take us all to the barbers. We were all lined up. So I got short back and sides, and the clippers used on me. So I had my hair cut in the same way as my brothers. So I had really super short hair. And at the moment, I have very long hair. So I was that term tomboy. I was a tomboy. Yeah.
No, I think it's that. Yeah, and I think I remember my female cousins, similar sort of thing. Sort of being out and, like you say, doing those, all hanging around together. There wasn't sort of a distinction between sort of genders then. It was like, we all play together, we all do things together, and we had chickens as well at the back of the garden, which was lovely. And I look back, and my dad had converted the garden into an allotment, so grew vegetables. So I learned from a very young age how to grow things and be in dirt. And every year I always say, at this time of year, this is March, April, I have to be, and I know you like gardening as well, I have to do something with the soil. I couldn't go a year without gardening in some way. And some people are like, oh no, I don't want to garden, get somebody else to do it.
That's so funny, Ranjit, because I had no idea about what gardening was, because it was just grass everywhere. No idea. The only thing we did in the garden was perhaps dig in it, as my poem said, or try and make fires. I think my brother tried to set fire to the jungle once. So no, nothing. I mean, my love of gardening has grown since I've come to this country, I think. It is an interesting thing about the idyllic experience of childhood. Not everybody, has an idyllic experience, and we're sort of sharing these very happy memories. But for some people it must be difficult. Yes.
And I think you're right. And I think this is why I say those stories, I've compartmentalized them, and they're happy stories now. There are some stories that, and I think when you're a young child, you don't quite understand all those things. And those sort of stories, I think I sort of block out a little bit because I know that I didn't have all the facts. So I quite like looking through rose-tinted spectacles, looking back at those fun and interesting things. Like I say, we didn't have a lot of money. So for us, we were quite poor, and I could see the comparisons with other communities. For me, living in an area that was very white, a lot of racism as well. So when we're younger, we got name calling and, we're at school. So I guess you didn't have to deal with that where you were. So,
No, I didn't at all.
so we dealt with that, and that was quite, as a young child, hiding that from parents because you didn't want them to be worried that you were at school and you were being, bullied or had names called. I've got a brother and two sisters. We would talk about those things together. We were very supportive, and my cousins, like I say, next door. Having that support network was quite good. But equally, it wasn't such a big deal when I look back. It was like, oh yeah, they called us a name, so what?
Yes, that's interesting, because for me, I mean, Malaysia is very multicultural. So we, our classrooms were, we had Indian, I'm putting myself under the Indian, Tamil, Chinese, Malay. We were mixed classrooms, but I don't remember it. I don't recall any sort of overt racism at all. I don't think I understood what it was until perhaps I came to England when I was much older. It was, was idyllic. I have a lot of other friends who've grown up in this country, and they, they share their stories with me, and it's a dissimilar experience. But in some ways, I can see why one might want to put it behind one, and I suppose if you've have the ability to discuss it with your family, and this idea that you keep it from your mum and dad, because even as children, you want to protect your parents, don't you?
And I think it's interesting. This is why when you talked about the military being around, and I always think things that you experience when you're younger and you deal with them incrementally, you sort of build up a strength, don't you? And so one of the strengths that I think from those times where people had made comments, and I was too young to know how to respond, looking back, you think, oh, well, I should have said this, I should have said that, I'm sharper now than I was back then because I'm dealing with something that's quite emotional. But I think I learned from it, and it made me a stronger person. And I remember Oprah Winfrey saying something that she thanks all those people from when she was younger for doing those things because it made her into the person she is today. I think it was something like that. But it made me think, in a sense, I know it sounds awful to see it this way. It was almost like a positive thing. It didn't hurt, didn't harm me, but it taught me skills in that processing and discussing it, and being part of a community that it was very hard in those days. And I think okay, we've moved into something totally different, but I think
no, it's okay. But I do want
things
to
go into
say,
those cycles, don't they? And I think now we're experiencing a bit of that now in the world. And I think for young people now, I always think, oh, they've got it easier than we have. But again, they have it harder. Like social media and all those other things that are maybe attacking them.
I think my younger self wants to reach out to your younger self and give you a hug, because I didn't have that. And although it made you stronger, it would have been nice to have been stronger some other way. To have learned different, because it's hard as a child. These memories stay with you. But as I said, you had that warmth and support of your extended family, which is very important. And they've stayed with you. Extended family stays with you throughout. And that idea of extended family, we both have extended family. It's great, but sometimes it could be overwhelming as well.
I mean,
on the whole, my experience is very positive, having come from an extended family.
I remember having a conversation with my cousin about this, because as I said, at the end of this garden, there was a drop and there was a train track, and we were like the railway children, the film where we're waving at all these people on the trains, and it's all these well-to-do people on the trains. Now looking back, these people who probably hadn't seen brown faces before were probably driving past, seeing these children waving at them, and we laugh now thinking it must have been quite a sight for them. Like about 5 or 6 young children, dressed in hand-me-downs as well, just waving at these people on the train.
Oh, you're making me laugh, because you were waving at people on a train, and I was waving at Australian troops going by.
Yes.
and they must have been wondering about us as well.
Yeah.
So you were children of the railway lines.
That's it.
Children of the train.
So this is the thing, it's all about reframing it, isn't it? It's like those times have gone, they're done. It's like, well, okay, how do you remember it now, and what do you gain from those experiences? But for people listening to this, I think one of the things we talked about was about childhood. There's so many things in our childhood that people can look back on, and we don't get enough time. You know, we talked about this before about, you know, stopping and reflecting, and that's part of the reason for having this chai and chat, because when we started speaking, we would stop and reflect and, you know, talk about our experiences, our childhood, our futures, and this is why this podcast came about. So
absolutely correct. As we said, you know, we could meander onto different paths, but a lot of it is to do with reflection as well.
Yeah.
And as you say, you know, a part of we're sharing our stories. Maybe it's time for when, as you say, when somebody's doing the dishes or doing some cooking, thinking and reflecting a little about that, especially about what we've said about taking the positives. But we must remember as well that there may be some people who may not have been able to move past it, and you know, and you know, as I say, my younger self would want to reach out to their younger self and say, you know, just give them a hug, because we don't know the people who are listening, but and just to recognize it. Yeah,
and I'm always fascinated at how people, what has influenced them and developed them to become the people they are today, and those little experiences, you know, move them in a certain way to a point that, you know, is positive or negative or whatever. But I think I remember going to it was like a positivity workshop, and this person said, you know, everything you've done in all your life has brought you to this position today that has made us meet. And you think, oh, wow, it's really weird. All the things we have done, like you and I when we met, all the things we'd ever done had brought us to that point.
Correct.
So I think in future podcasts, it's going to be interesting, because we did say that we'd have guests involved as well. So we'll bring like somebody in and we can quiz them and interview them, which I think is going to be quite exciting.
Well, I think I'd probably quite enjoy quizzing somebody as opposed to just quizzing you then. Tell me a little bit more about this.
Yeah, we'll be fighting over asking them questions. I think this is the thing. I think
we're both competitive about because we're so inquisitive. I think that's what it is. You know,
inquisitive. That's a nice way. That's a nice thing to call it. Absolutely. I think we're nosy.
Do you know what I love? I love the fact that when you speak to somebody, they say something, then you come up with other reflections about what they've said, and that's how these conversations continue, really.
So bringing it back then, when we're young and those sort of memories, I think there's things that we both experienced about being out and being in nature, and I think there's something else about, you know, how those have shaped us as well. So I think for people listening, maybe we'd invite them to think about those things as well. Brilliant. Okay, so I think that's it for today. Thank you, Sundari. It's been lovely chatting to you.
Yes, thank you, Ranjit. It's been lovely chatting to you as well. Catch up again soon.
Yes, and we'll catch everyone again soon. So take care.
Take care. Bye.
Chai and Chat.